Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The Israeli military confirms that it shot dead a Palestinian man during a raid in the Al-Farah refugee camp in the northern West Bank. The IDF has said that the suspect planned to harm soldiers, yet no troops were injured in the operation. Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara has arrived in the United States. According to reports, he is set to meet US President Donald Trump. Both leaders are set to discuss Syria being part of the international coalition against ISIS. Russia warns the European Union against provoking retaliatory measures over its new ban on multiple entry visas for Russian citizens. Spokeswoman Maria Zakharova says Moscow will respond based on national interests, including mirror or asymmetrical actions if necessary. Rodrigo Paz has taken office as Bolivia's new president, ending nearly 20 years of socialist rule. The pro-business leader pledged to open Bolivia to the world, restore U.S. ties, and tackle the nation's deep economic crisis and soaring inflation. China has suspended its ban on exports of gallium, germanium, antimony, and super-hard materials to the U.S. effective until November 27, 2026. According to the Commerce Ministry, the move temporarily lifts restrictions imposed in December 2024 on these critical dual-use materials vital to high-tech and defense industries. Germany will establish a 12-member expert committee to reassess trade relations with China, focusing on energy, raw materials, and investment security, following growing economic tensions between these two giant economies as Chancellor Friedrich Merz's coalition backs this motion. The Philippines is now evacuated over 100,000 people as Super Typhoon Uwan, also known as Phang Vong, heads towards Luzon with torrential rains. In destructive winds, authorities have raised signal number 5, the highest in Catanduanes and parts of Camarines, as the storm threatens to make landfall in Orola province. A powerful tornado has struck Parana, Brazil, killing 6 people and injuring over 400 people. Rio Bonito do Iguacu suffered severe damage with collapsed roofs and blocked roads. Authorities are aiding around 1,000 displaced residents, while federal officials join the ongoing relief efforts. Now we start with the Middle East. Israel's military chief has vowed to bring home the remains of an officer killed more than a decade ago in Gaza, following reports that Hamas has identified the location of his body after a search approved by Israel. According to the Army Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, he has met with the family of Lieutenant Hadar Goldin, who was killed during the 2014 six-week war in Gaza. Since his death, Goldin's body has been held in Gaza, with Hamas never publicly confirming his death or acknowledging possession of his remains. Another Israeli soldier, Oron Shaul, who was also killed in the 2014 conflict, whose body was recovered earlier this year during the ongoing war. Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. Wael Awad. He's a Middle East affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Dr. Wael, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how do you analyze the current ceasefire situation between Israel and Gaza, and how do you think that we ready for phase 2 as the hostage body exchange? Some of them still remain, and Hamas IDF still continue to violate ceasefire.
Yeah, exactly, Asuma. This is what's happening actually right now. The problem that we are about to get into the second phase of the ceasefire, where Hamas has already been handing over a dead body of remaining of soldiers, which he was being kept for since 2014, and that's a clear indication that there are certain pressures on both sides from the United States and also the Hamas having some problem within the Rafah region where Israeli troops are still stationed there. So therefore, they are trying to show like a good gesture by giving the remaining of this body. However, the situation in the ground remains very grave because we have such a lots of denial of the allowing the food aids to enter into the country, despite the fact that Britain also have issued a statement that they wanted the food aids to enter into Gaza because of the starvation of the people they are facing. And also the development in Israel itself, the internal turmoil of calling that they wanted to go back into the war against Hamas, that's also aggravated the situation. And the remaining of the situation in the occupied territories, also we see that what's happening in West Bank currently, that the farmers, the Palestinian farmers have been attacked by settlers, and there are more than even journalists and even activists have been attacked by the Israelis, and one boy was killed by the Israeli army in West Bank. It's a clear indication that while the world is focusing on Gaza, Israel partially or completely.
Yes, indeed. And how do you analyze the aid situation? Do you think there is any trustworthy body that could look after the aid flow into Gaza and make sure the aid is reaching all the people in need in Gaza?
Well, I think everybody knows that every person, 2.4 million in Gaza, people living there are in need of desperately needing help. The strip, you will get somebody who will be needing of it. That's because the second weapon have been used after the ceasefire is actually the starvation and the famine. Because every story you hear from the families of the Palestinians who survived the genocide, they will tell you that there is no place to live, there is no shelter, there is no food, there is no water, there is nothing on the land, everything is burned, everything is destroyed. So how you wanted these people to survive? Why you wanted to make sure how many, I mean, if you have 2.4 million people are hungry and you are having around 5 to 10,000 of the Hamas, will you compromise on the issues of denying the majority of the Palestinians because you are not achieving what you want and you wanted to please your internal politics to survive politically?
Yes. And Dr. Awai, lastly, do you think that other countries should help with I think they are called ISF, the international force that is supposed to be looking after in the phase 2, who should be deployed in this zone to make sure the ceasefire holds and the transition government can transition safely the government power to upcoming maybe situation or government in Gaza. Who do you think should be involved?
I think the United States is directly involved in this, and there will be international assistance forces, but see the dictation from the Israeli side, they are not interested in allowing any forces to come in Gaza without their approval. And it's not even calling it an international forces because they know that this is under the international law. They are still, the Palestinians are under occupation, whether they are in West Bank, whether they are in Gaza Strip. So therefore, giving them that international tag on them will not allow the Israelis free hand to attack inside and also violate the ceasefire or whatever agreement they achieve to. And secondly, the United States is applying a tremendous pressure, and I am sure that President Trump, he is in a position to ensure not only the ceasefire, but also to ensure the flow of the aids, and also make sure that the Israeli government does not violate what have been accepted and what have been approved by both sides. So therefore, most of the people in the ground, they believe that UNRWA, the UN Agency for Refugees, and the other UN aids which have been working in the region for more than 5 to 6 decades, have been giving the Palestinians all their aids and help. I think these are the right agency to allow them also to let the food flow and distribution of the food, not to depend on certain numbers of American ex-soldier or ex-army or the United States and the Israelis who have already had some people within the Gaza Strip, and they are already allowing these people to create havoc and kill other people and being their, their malls inside, so to create a kind of a civil war within the Palestinian rather than helping the suffering of the people.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Wael Awad for joining us as a Middle East affairs expert from New Delhi. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Russia-Ukraine. Russian Defense Ministry has stated that the Russian defense units have destroyed 44 Ukrainian drones in an overnight attack. Previously, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky released a video statement saying that the Russian forces have launched over 450 drones and 45 missiles in overnight attacks on Ukraine on Saturday, targeting Ukraine's energy sector as well as other infrastructures. Zelensky has also reiterated his calls on Kyiv's allies to introduce stronger sanctions against the Russian energy sector in response to Russia's intensifying attacks over the past week.
Багато балістики, щонайменше 25 балістичних ракет було. Також були аеробалістичні та крилаті ракети, ще більш ніж 450 безпілотників різних типів, дуже наглий. Багато в чому удар демонстративний. Тиску на Росію замало, і будь-які послаблення в уже існуючих форматах тиску тільки мотивують Путіна затягувати цю війну, завдавати більшої шкоди нашій країні, нашим людям. Слабкість реагування на російську наглість, саме наглість, дає мотив Росії продовжувати цю війну. Потрібно стільки санкцій, стільки тиску, стільки підтримки життю, щоб у Росії не залишились засобів до існування в умовах.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Vasilin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean of Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, now looking at this continuous escalation of attacks on Ukraine, how effective are international sanctions in deterring Russia's continued attacks on Ukraine, and what role should Ukrainian allies do in responding to these escalation of drone and missile strikes now?
Yes, Asuma, it's another day of Russian strikes. Unfortunately, some casualties reported, 400 drones and 45 ballistic missiles. Well, that's only what Russia can do. They cannot do anything else. They cannot talk, they cannot think, they cannot negotiate. Everything that Russia does is killing civilians, women and children, every week, sometime every day. And for that matter, it's like Hamas in a big country like Russia, absolutely nothing to talk with Russia. It needs to be contained, it needs to be sanctioned. Sanctions don't work only because China, India, and big countries don't impose sanctions, by the way. Only Western countries in America, and Australia, and Canada, and Japan, and South Korea. If half of the world does not impose sanctions on Russia, they will not work, because half of the world is buying Russian oil, gas, weapons, and everything else. What Russia can do is simply to kill civilians, nothing else. And your question should go to the governments in China, India, Indonesia, and Africa, and ask them why they continue sponsoring the war by buying Russian oil and gas. Sanctions do work if they are global, if they are universal, like the one Iraq-Kuwait aggression. After that, the United Nations imposed global sanctions, and those sanctions did work. They did contain Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein couldn't do any more aggression and any more development of weapons after the sanctions. Sanctions did work against Southern Rhodesia and South Africa back in the 60s. Sanctions did work against Libya, and Muammar Gaddafi surrendered the terrorist suspect. Sanctions work only if they are global, if everybody follows them. If half of the countries do not follow them, they don't work. And for that matter, yes, my appeal is for everybody, every single government of the world to stop buying Russian products, any products, comprehensive embargo, stop dealing with Russia. And that's the only way this war will end, I'm afraid.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Popovsky, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. Now, Russia has issued a warning to the European Union, saying it will not allow the EU to provoke retaliatory measures over visa policies that could harm Russia's national interests. The European Union recently announced a ban on issuing new multiple entry Schengen visas to Russian citizens, a move that Russia considers a provocation. According to Russia's foreign ministry, this decision is part of a wider strategy to test Russia's response, with the EU hoping to incite some form of retaliation. Russia says it is prepared to respond in a way that is both symmetrical and asymmetrical, depending on what it deems to do in the country's best interest. Russia also claims that the EU's actions could backfire and drive Europe towards a self-destructive path, particularly as it affects legal Russian tourists and visitors who have proper documentation and financial backing. While the ban targets new multiple entry visas, existing visas for Russians remain valid for now, but Russia has vowed to take action if the EU continues with such policies. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Vasilin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Professor, now looking at this, how could this EU's visa restrictions on Russian citizens, not journalists, impact diplomatic relations between Russia and Europe? Should visa policies be used as a political tool?
Well, the relationship is absolutely minimal, exactly because of the Russian aggression in Ukraine. It's not the European Union imposing visa restrictions 4 years later. The relationship between Europeans and Russia stopped when Russia invaded Ukraine. It's so simple. Every escalation is done by Moscow, by Russia. If they withdraw from Ukraine, the relationship will be reinvented, revitalized. And it's really funny. I'm smiling at every statement by Zakharova, the Russian Foreign Ministry's spokesperson, when she said there will be retaliation. What retaliation? What can Russia do? Will Russia impose restrictions for foreigners to come to Russia? No, Westerners want to go to Russia anymore. Nobody in the world wants to go to Russia anymore. It's a prison. It's a dangerous place. Nobody should go to Russia. If Russia imposes restrictions of anybody going, that's good news. Don't go to Russia. You might be arrested at the airport for nothing, put in prison, and then negotiated to be exchanged. Simple. So all these talks about the West escalating the diplomatic warfare is absolutely nonsense. It's actually a response to the fact that Russia is trying to inflict some damage on the West by putting some spies, some agents, KGB people into the Western country and to use them for their manipulative purposes. That's all. That's what the European Union is trying to safeguard itself by restricting some individuals to enter Russia. That's so simple here. Every time Russia is talking about retaliation, and let's see a couple of days later what would that be, it will be another statement by Sakharov in a couple of days saying we will do another retaliation. That's all Russia can do. As I mentioned earlier, everything that Russia can do is killing civilians in Ukraine and empty talk about everything else. You know, a week ago they talked about Burevestnik, a very dangerous weapon they are going to start producing again, to come to reactivating that system was disbanded in the Soviet Union 50 years ago because it's absolutely useless rocket. They found out, the Soviets back in the 1960s, that Burevestnik doesn't work. It's very heavy, easily to be spotted, easily to be targeted, and doesn't bring any military advantage. So all the Russian talk is about that, reactivating something from the Soviet era, yet the same with Oreshnik, the same with Topol. Every speech by Sakharov or by Lavrov or by Putin makes me really laugh. Somebody knowing the Soviet Union, it's laughable to hear those threats from Moscow because they're absolutely empty, they are useless. It's simply to respond something for the Russian audience that they are doing something, but that something is actually absolutely nothing. Don't listen to Sakharova, please. Don't ask me anymore to comment what Kremlin, Sakharova, Lavrov, or Putin say. This is always an empty talk, it's manipulative talk. It's about their own population to stay obedient, slavish, and not to protest. That's all. Thank you.
With that, I would like to thank Professor Veselin Popolsky for always joining us and sharing your insight on these topics. Thank you. Now we move on to Germany. Germany's coalition's government is set to re-examine its trade policies with China amid rising tensions between the two major economies. Chancellor Friedrich Merz's Conservative Party and Social Democratic coalition partners have proposed establishing a committee of experts to assess security-relevant trade relations and provide recommendations to the parliament. The committee will include academics, industry representatives, and labor officials. It will review China's role in energy, raw materials, imports, as well as investments in critical German infrastructure, ensuring that Germany's strategic interests are safeguarded. According to the proposal, the committee will report to Parliament twice a year. It will examine trade policies from legal, economic, and political perspectives, while also taking into account other countries' trade ties with China. The move comes after recent Chinese restrictions on rare earth exports threatened Germany's vital car industry, coupled with Beijing's tacit support for Russia in its war against Ukraine, prompting a policy rethink. The government aims to protect key industries, with Friedrich Merz backing European trade rules to support local businesses. Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. AJ Dua. He's a former Secretary of Commerce and senior economist, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Dr. AJ, for joining us again. Good to see you. Dr. AJ, now looking at this, how should Germany balance economic dependence on China with the need to safeguard its national and strategic interests? Should countries have the right to intervene in foreign-owned companies operating within their borders?
Thank you very much for having me. I think Germany has so far handled its relations with the external world, let me put it that way. That includes all these superpowers, the United States, Russia, as well as China, fairly deftly. Post the Second World War, when it had been ravaged completely, and it has recovered from there in the last 75 or 80 years to be the world's third largest economy and our world's heavy industry and machinery making center of the world virtually. It's such exports go all over the world, including to the United States, and as well as a fair amount to China as well. Now that now that Germany finds that the Chinese have weaponized its trade policies and its trading, it is sitting back and saying, why not us? If China can use its power over rare earths, for instance, to get its foreign policy objectives in line, why shouldn't Germany also be able to protect itself, not necessarily weaponize, but its respond by being alert to make sure that its security concerns are met once China realizes, and I think the meeting between President Xi Jinping and President Trump seems to have given China an impression that it has arrived on the world scene, and then now, because President Trump talked of a G2, that between the two of them, they can be the superpowers and they can decide a lot of things which impact others. So I think the steps taken by the German, now it's due for voting, but likely to be passed this resolution early next week itself, that will make Germany sit up, review all its trade policies vis-a-vis China, initially finding out more about its security concerns. And somebody who's fought 2 world wars badly or at the end of it, they can be concerned about their existence. And the fact that the Chinese just in the last 3 months managed to derail the Germany's advanced manufacturing of cars and car components for cars only by sitting back on the magnets which it produces and the processing of the rare earths. Also, China is flooding, and
Yes.
that not just the Germany, the entire European market realizes that with its huge capacity in steel, it through exporting greater quantities of steel, not necessarily, it may not do that to the US because of the tariff issues and logistics, but in Europe, a fair amount of steel does come from China, and steel, as we all know, is a major sinew basis for infrastructure and a lot of manufacturing. So I am actually one with Germany. I appreciate their concern, and I do hope that the standing committee, it's like, since it's to report to the parliament twice a year, so this committee can be called, it's not just one-off, but it will be there forever till members are changed, etc. It keeps looking at the concerns vis-a-vis China. Yes, we all know China is a big economy. China is now gaining in strength, but China is the country which has used its trade to further its foreign policy, to further its strategic interests, most unlike other countries, though it talks about promoting free trade, telling everybody that let's follow the rule-based trade being promoted by WTO, but on its own, it is liable, and it has shown that it can use it by not necessarily pursue foreign trade, but use it to achieve its other than trade goals as well.
Yes, and lastly, Dr. AJ, how could Germany's reassessment of trade relations with China affect its long-term economic growth and industrial competitiveness?
I think the Chinese competitiveness in most items is established. I don't think any country in Europe, given its high cost of labor particularly, is looking forward to bringing its prices down to a level which can compete with the Chinese. But Europe continues, and Germany in particular, to be a very strong, have a very strong manufacturing base in capital goods. As I had mentioned earlier, particularly machinery and equipment, and current state-of-the-art technology in a lot of these industries. And I think China looks forward, though China is fast developing in certain aspects of technology we all know, particularly robotics, but it also depends upon technology flows from Germany. So I think, yes, there would be some adverse effect could be an adverse effect in the mutual trade, bilateral trade between the two, but it may not be significant, and Germany can more than make up what it loses with China by exporting more to the US. With US, EU has already arrived at an agreement, and also within the bloc, as well as Germany, they can be trading with the buoyant South Asia and the Southeast Asia more than it does today. So I don't think there is too much concern for Germany to be able to find the alternate market for the goods the export of which shrinks in case it takes a stand like what it's proposing to do vis-a-vis China.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Dr. AJ Dua for joining us as a former Secretary of Commerce and Senior Economist from New Delhi. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. Rodrigo Paz, a pro-business conservative, takes office as the Bolivia's president, ending nearly 20 years of socialist rule and inheriting acute economic woes. In his inauguration speech, he says that Bolivia will now be different and open economy to the world after 2 decades of communist rule. Let's listen into what Rodrigo Paz has said.
El país que recibimos está devastado. Nos deja una economía quebrada con las reservas internacionales más bajas en 30 años. Nos dejan la inflación, escasez, deuda, desconfianza. Nos dejan un Estado paralizado, un monstruo burocrático incapaz de servir al pueblo. Nos dejan filas interminables para conseguir combustible, mercados vacíos, salarios que no alcanzan. Nos dejan una nación cansada, dividida, endeudada moral y material.
Earlier, when Evo Morales was in office from 2006 to 2019, the economy took a sharp turn and nationalized energy resources, meanwhile breaking ties with US and making alliances with China, Russia, Cuba, Venezuela, and other countries in Latin America. World leaders attended the oath ceremony of Rodrigo Paz and congratulated him. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.